It's time for our craft today and our lesson on Joseph. One of the things Joseph is known for is his coat of many colors. And today we're going to be making our own coat of many colors. Here's a hint. This is what it's going to look like. So get ready to get messy. Let's get started. All right, let's see what's in our craft bag this week. We've got a t-shirt, which I have turned into a coat for you. And I used part of our old tablecloths from our previous lessons to seam them up there. So let's set that aside. Oops. And then in this bag, we've got lots of equipment we'll be using. We've got a plastic bag that has a set of gloves and some rubber bands for our project. We've got a little plastic, I think that's oh, I know what that is. This is an apron for you to put on to protect your clothes from the dye that we'll be using. And it's got these two parts here that you can tie around your neck and protect the front of your clothes as we do work. And then I've got dye for you. Now I believe you have about 6 colors of dye because his coat was very colorful. And I've included about 3 here so I can show you how to work the dye. So let's get started. So I don't know if you have done any tie-dye before, but what we do first in preparing our tie-dye is scrunch and rubber band. So the way I did this coat that I'm wearing now, let me pull it off so you can see it, is I made about 6 little bunches of color. I would grab the fabric, let's see, here's one. You can see one here was the center. And I started right in the center and I twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted till I had a nice long clump of it. And then, opening my bag of rubber bands here, I put several rubber bands up and down this clump of fabric that I had. And that's how I got these sort of rosette designs. Let's see if we can find another one on here. There's one right here. They're sort of circles of color. Now I'm thinking, here's one on the front that you can see that started here in the center and then sort of blossom outwards. But I think on this one I'm going to try a different effect and we'll see how it goes. I think what I'm going to do with this one, let me get my rubber bands out, is do a different kind of scrunching. I'm thinking about doing something like this. Just kind of like a Venetian blind, and then putting rubber bands around it here. So check back with me in a minute and we'll see how this really works out. All right, as you can see, I'm still putting some rubber bands on this. I ended up doing it a little differently than I suggested. I've ended up making a couple of different little scrunchies that I've put rubber bands around. And I will suggest too, if you've got some different size or thicknesses of rubber bands at home, feel free to grab those with your parents' approval and try different thicknesses of rubber bands, because whatever you can do to this is going to make the pattern that much more unique. So I've got a couple of different little clumps here that I've put rubber bands around each. What we'll do now is mix up our dye. All right, it's time to mix up our dye. And this is very simple. You're just gonna put water almost to the top of this little container. That'll tell you what the color is. And then you'll screw the top back on and you're gonna shake it. So let's see if I can do this without making too much of a mess. This was a handy way for me to ship dye to your house without worrying that Mr. Ken's car was going to get filled with broken bottles of dye. All right, so there we have some dark red. This one's going to be brown. And I've just poured it all over the tablecloth. I'm glad I have a little plastic sheet down. That is another thing. Included in your bag this week is a plastic tablecloth. Now you can see I've got my plastic tablecloth down. I would suggest that before you do any of this, you put your plastic tablecloth down, because this is a messy, fun project. Check back with me in a second. Okay, I assume you have your plastic tablecloths ready to go. Now, this little bitty thing that was in your small bag with the rubber bands, this may be the most important part of the process. These are plastic gloves to protect your hands. And the reason they are important is because yesterday, as I was making my coat of many colors, I thought, I don't need any gloves. I don't like using gloves. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but can you see how yellow Miss Leigh's hand is right now? Kind of a mess. That's what happens when you don't wear the gloves. This is a very hands-on project. I had my little hands down in that yellow dye so deep, almost up to my elbow. So I'm probably going to have yellow hands for about a week, and you probably don't want to have yellow hands because it's not very attractive. So wear your gloves, kids. If you take nothing else away from this craft, remember that. Okay, so we've got our dye, we've got our shirt with the rubber bands. I'm going to start with my lightest color, and excuse me, I'm not going to unscrew the top. I'm going to pop the little plastic lid off. There you go, there you can see it. Now, this is where you really get your hands involved. You're going to start, because the dye does not immediately sink into the shirt. So you're going to press down on it. You're going to poke it down in the crevices. Go all around this little area here. You can see it's going to come off on your plastic. What a mess. And just kind of squeeze to make sure it gets moved around on there. Let's go over, work on some of this part of the shirt. How about right around here? And go on, don't worry about which way the dye goes. It's going to ultimately end up in places you don't want it to go anyway, but that's part of the fun of it. This unpredictable coat dyeing. How's that? Does that look pretty good? Let's go somewhere in here. I want little pops of yellow all over my shirt. How about around in there? Now, right now, the only dye laying on my table is yellow. So that's why I'm feeling free to kind of press down on the table to get some of this dye. There we go, nice big yellow part there. But in a few minutes, when I start using another color, the dye on my tablecloth is going to be kind of a mess of color. So at that point, I will not be using my hands to press the shirt down into the table. All right, so I have put my gold on, which actually looks orange, and then I used my red. Almost looks like a blood stain, sadly. Oh well. And I've got one more color. You have 6 colors. You can use all 6 of them if you want. You can just use a few of them. I would say use at least 3, which is what. Okay, so now I'm putting my last color on. And I'm just going to sort of fill in some of these white areas with the brown color. This will be a nice contrast. When you're putting your colors down, you might want to put colors close to each other that look good together, or go in the opposite direction and put colors next to each other that kind of clash. That's part of the fun of tie-dye. think about, well, no matter how much you think about what you want the final product to look like, it's not going to look like that. It's going to surprise you every time. But I hope you have fun with this. And every time you look at it, it will remind you of Joseph and his colorful coat that seemed to cause a bit of a problem within his family. Okay, I'm about done. The last step in this project is, do you remember that plastic bag that this came in? I want you to gather up everything and shove it into that plastic bag, which I don't have sitting on the table right now. Zip it up and then walk away for at least 8 hours. I let mine sit overnight. So what it does is that gives your shirt at least 8 hours for this color to set in. So after 8 hours or more, pull out your coat and remove the rubber bands in an area that's protected from the dye. You could do this on newspapers that you've laid down or in a stainless sink. Then you'll get a glimpse of what your coat's going to look like. But first, rinse out your fabric in cool water thoroughly until the water running off that coat is clear, not tinted. Trust me, I didn't do that step all the way, and now my dryer is coated with pink dye. The third thing you do is stick it in the dryer and enjoy wearing your creation. I hope you've enjoyed this craft.